Chapter 20. 'Tis the season. Books were flung aside without being put away on the shelves. Inkstands were overturned, benches thrown down, and the whole school was turned loose an hour before the usual time, bursting forth like a legion of young imps. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. The last couple of days before Christmas vacation were brutal, and I wasn't the only one tired of studying for midterms. Once class started, attention would quickly turn from what was being written on the board to who was wearing what for the upcoming Christmas dance. It was bad enough to see the colorful posters leaving down at me everywhere with their obnoxious cheerfulness, but that was nothing compared to the stab of loneliness I felt whenever a snippet of conversation would reach my ear. "Oh my God, I have the most perfect dress. It's red and white." Did I care that the theme of the dance would be Winter Wonderland romance? No. I heard they're going to make it snow. Did I care that there would be delicate glass icicles and moons of fluffy fake snow covering everything? No. Can you believe there's going to be sleigh rides? Did I care that a horse-drawn buggy would be available so you could take a romantic ride outside with your date? No. Did I want to go to the stupid dance? Yes, desperately. It really wasn't fair. I had a boyfriend now. Sure, we weren't exactly seeing eye to eye at the moment, but I was supposed to be one of those girls deciding what dress I would wear to the dance, not standing on the outside looking in. A pang of guilt hit me when I realized that only 2 months ago I hadn't gone to a dance because Kristen would never have the chance to go. Feeling like a terrible best friend, I promptly banished all thoughts of the dance to the back of my mind and swore not to think about it again. The final bell buzzed loudly overhead and jerked me out of my thoughts. Doors suddenly burst open up and down the long hallway while voices filled the air. Most of the students didn't even stop at their lockers. They had 2 weeks of freedom ahead of them and they wanted out. I couldn't blame them. Alone now in the empty corridor, I threw my book bag to the floor and left the zipper wide open. My locker door slammed into the door next to it, but I didn't care. I picked up my English lit book and tossed it in. Stupid Christmas dance. My algebra book was next. Stupid icicles and fake snow. Then science. And the horse will probably poop everywhere. The dull thuds were strangely satisfying, and I threw in the last couple of books with vehemence. I was completely out of ammo now, and my locker looked hollow and forlorn. Then I looked down and saw dozens of gum wrappers, balled up pieces of notebook paper, and chewed pencils scattered along the bottom. Time for a quick clean out. Taking advantage of the clear hallway, I dragged over the nearest garbage can. It was made of very old, very loud, monstrous metal, and it made an ungodly screeching noise. I fought and pulled and genuinely pleaded with the thing to please cooperate with me, if only a little. Fortunately, it chose to cooperate, and half the battle was over once I parked it next to my locker. I started hurling in gum wrappers, forgotten class notes from last semester, an old science test that I had looked everywhere for, a handful of ratty pencils, a picture of Kristen and me. The picture went sailing by before I even had a chance to recognize it, and then it was too late. As I stared down into that deep pile of nasty garbage, I knew I couldn't leave it there. The picture had been taken last year on a school field trip, and it was the only copy I had. At first I tried to just reach my arm in, staying carefully away from the goopy sides, but I came up short, about 6 inches too short. I wished for someone tall to still be hanging around who could suddenly appear and get it for me, but a quick glance down the hall told me there was 0 chance of that happening. I was alone and it was up to me. So I went in. Holding my breath and placing a piece of scrap paper as a barrier between my shirt and the can, I bent over and lunged for all I was worth. There wasn't much light once I was inside, so I was reaching blindly until I felt the photo. I also managed to somehow grab a half-eaten candy bar while I was at it, but I quickly let that drop and hauled ass out of there. I lifted myself up and out of the trash can, trying to swing my hair out of the way. Then I backed up a step, picture firmly in hand, and promptly ran into someone. Dread instantly bloomed in the pit of my stomach as I realized that whoever was behind me had just witnessed my dumpster dive. Not exactly one of my finest moments. I turned around slowly. Ben's laughing brown eyes began to come into focus, and he had a strange look on his face, like he was holding in a snort and a laugh at the same time. I hung my head as my cheeks went red. It's not what you think. I dropped something accidentally in there and had to get it out. That was the only way. He shook his head and still had that strange look on his face. Only at my insistent, "Go ahead," did he double over and burst into gales of laughter. But at least it didn't last long. "I'm sorry, Abby," he said, wiping away tears. "Really, I didn't mean to laugh at you. It was just a funny picture. I thought maybe you were going after a sandwich in there or something." He gave me a silly grin, and I grinned back. It was infectious. I leaned against my locker and wedged my hip against it for support, abandoning all attempts to look cool. What possibly could have made Ben choose this moment to find me? He gave me a serious smile and glanced over at my locker door nervously. "So, how are things going for you, Abby?" For a moment, déjà vu hit. Hadn't I already been asked this before? "Things are good," I answered after the feeling passed. "What about you?" "Good. They've been good for me too," he said. "I started dating Amanda Reynolds. We've been going out for the last month or so." Amanda Reynolds. The name tickled the back of my brain, but I couldn't place it. "Sorry, I don't know her." He looked back at the locker and then down at the garbage can. "We went to prom together." My lips made the sound before I even thought it. "Ooh." "Yellow dress, from prom night, the one who'd said I was a bitch." "It's not like it's serious or anything," he shrugged. "But who wants to be alone at Christmas?" I nodded my head slowly. "Yeah, who wants to be alone on Christmas?" He looked me in the eye for a second and hesitated, almost like he was waiting for me to say something. I stayed silent, and he continued on. "So, anyway, how are things with you and what's his name?" "Caspian," I supplied. "His name is Caspian. And things are good, I guess. We're trying to figure some stuff out, but it's all good." He nodded, and we both stood there in an awkward silence. Ben was the one to break the stalemate. "Here." He pulled something out of his back pocket. "This is for you." He held out a red envelope, and I looked at it in surprise. "It's just a Christmas card," he said, answering my silent question. "Not a big deal. Just, 'cause 'tis the season and all." I looked down at the card again, dumbfounded. He had gotten a Christmas card for me? I hadn't gotten one from anyone else. It was a high school tradition that you exchange Christmas cards with all of your friends each year, but since Kristen and I had only been friends with each other, that had left our card list fairly short. I don't know what to say. It was true, I really didn't. I hadn't even taken the card yet. "Don't say anything, just take the card." He held it out closer to me, and I took it, pathetically grateful. "Thank you, Ben. This means a lot to me." Seeing that the picture I'd worked so hard to rescue from the garbage can was still in my hand, I thrust it at him. "I wanted to have this." He tried to protest at first, but I wouldn't budge. Finally, he accepted it. I didn't miss the fact that he touched Kristen's smiling face before he tucked it into his pocket. Ducking his head, he turned shy on me. "I have to go. You take care, Abby, and Merry Christmas." "Yeah, you too," I called out to him as he turned and started to walk away. "Happy holidays." I waited and didn't open the envelope from Ben until I started walking home. There was just a generic Happy Holidays card inside, signed with his name, but it really did mean a lot to me. I felt terrible that I didn't have one for him, but it was too late now. If I gave him one when we got back to school, I'd look like someone who was obviously just returning the favor. Oh well, at least there was next year. When I finally got home, I heaved a sigh of relief as I shrugged the book bag off my aching shoulders and let it drop to the floor in a graceful heap. I didn't even care that Mom would probably yell at me later for leaving it in the middle of the hallway. It just didn't matter. I walked toward the kitchen and went through the notions of grabbing a snack before heading up to my room. After turning on the computer, I rested my head in my hands as I waited for it to boot up. I was so tired. Exhaustion was a constant companion of mine. The computer clicked and beeped and whirred, and when all the noises stopped, I knew it was good to go. I signed on to the internet and took my time checking my email. Then I browsed through a couple of familiar shopping websites. Most of them were offering free, expedited shipping for the holidays, and once again my mind turned to presents. I mentally checked off the list in my head of who was already bought for, and that left me with only Mr. and Mrs. Maxwell. Still unsure of what to get them, I typed unique gifts into a search engine box and hit enter. Within seconds, dozens of listings popped up on my screen. I was unhappy with all of them until I finally came upon a site advertising to name a star after someone. 10 minutes later, I was sold. Naming a star for Kristen would be the perfect gift. The Maxwells would love it. I quickly clicked my way to the checkout, wincing at the fact that free expedited shipping was not offered on this website, and in order to get my certificate of notice in time for Christmas, it would cost me an extra $32. But I chose it anyway, since it was Christmas after all, and Uncle Bob had given me a bonus. As I entered Mom's credit card number from memory, I sternly reminded myself to give her the money for it later. Thoughts of Uncle Bob brought to mind the fact that I had totally forgotten about getting a gift for him, so I started clicking my way through more websites. It was even harder finding something for him, and a couple of moments later I turned the computer off, frustrated to no end. When had shopping become so difficult? I shoved my chair back and stood up, pacing over to the window seat. Outside, a light snow was falling, and the frosty scene was beautiful and calm. Inside, though, I felt nothing but worry and anxiousness. I desperately wanted to go to the cemetery and find Caspian. Deciding that a distraction was in order, I grabbed my coat and headed downstairs. To keep my mind off things, this time I would go in the opposite direction of the cemetery, Main Street. And maybe I would even find something for Uncle Bob while I was at it. I remembered my gloves this time and quickly pulled them on as I walked. Within minutes, the first shop came into view. It was absolutely beautiful, and I stopped to gaze at the decorations. Tiny red bows and green garland accentuated by silver glass balls hung from the outside of the store, while strings of popcorn and twinkling white lights covered the inside. Looking around me, I noticed that this wasn't the only decorated storefront. The neighbors had really gone all out. I strolled slowly, observing the big red bow on each shop's front door. That was surely Mom's handiwork. She had created the perfect bow, of course, and it definitely added the right touch. Even the street corners had been decorated, and a large old-fashioned gas lamp sat on each corner. The dancing flames flickering behind the covered glass shades starkly illuminated the still falling flakes of snow. It was a sight to see, and I briefly felt like I had been transported back in time. The next window I passed was bare and empty, but I stopped. It was my shop, or my future shop anyway. I reached out one hand and lovingly ran my finger over the dirty glass. The painted wooden frame was chipped and peeling, but I didn't care. It was waiting for me. This would be my baby one day. I daydreamed about how I would set it up. Maybe I would use an old clawfoot bathtub and mismatched armoires to display my wares. I could have a reading section with a library of old books, featuring all of Washington Irving's works. Or perhaps there would be antique tables and apothecary bottles. An old-fashioned beauty store of sorts. The possibilities were endless. My thoughts ran wild, but I reluctantly pulled myself away from the window. I didn't have very much time left before all of the shops would start to close, and I'd be seeing Uncle Bob tomorrow. I needed to find him a present, and I needed to find it fast. A tiny florist shop yielded me the perfect gift for Uncle Bob, and he was thrilled with the world's best boss mug that I presented to him at work on Saturday. He made sure to bring it in each time he came to check on me, holding it up so I could see he was using it. I barely got any work done at all. On Sunday, he seemed content to let the mug sit on his desk and finally got to start a new project. When it was time for Mom to pick me up that evening, I reminded Uncle Bob that I would see him in 2 weeks and told him yet again that he was very welcome for the mug. I hurried out of there before he got the chance to go pick it up again. I was finally free for the holidays and ready for the relaxation to begin. Over the next 3 days, I slept until noon, made dozens of cookies with Mom, and drank hot chocolate by the gallon. It was completely blissful. Christmas Eve came before I knew it, and I spent most of the morning helping Mom box up cookies for all our extended family members. Which probably explained why Mom always went a little cookie crazy every year. We had a lot of relatives. After we finished packaging the last of them up, I went to my room to wrap some presents of my own. The Name a Star certificate had arrived just in time, and I was thrilled to see that it came in a beautiful black frame. I added a little bit of a gift wrap and a red bow and had it finished in no time. Next up were Mom's and Dad's gifts, and they didn't take very long to wrap either. I dug deep into my creative side to find a unique way to wrap Caspian's gifts. After finding some dark blue wrapping paper and adding some strategically placed tiny silver star stickers, I drew on a couple of swirling designs with a grey marker. The result was perfect. Trying to find a red pen to write his name with, I dug around in my perfume supply box. I stopped for a minute when my eyes landed on the sample I made for Kristen. Uncapping the blue glass bottle, I poured a tiny amount into a tester vial and added it to the present pile. I couldn't forget my best friend. Once that task was complete and I had found the red pen, my thoughts wandered back to the cemetery. I struggled with the decision of whether or not to go there, while I absent-mindedly wrote names on each present. It was Christmas, after all, and it really didn't matter who said what, as long as everything was okay between us. Indecision had me chewing my lip with worry, so I decided to distract myself with more cookies. Cookies had always worked before, and hopefully that wouldn't let me down now. I went downstairs to the kitchen and threw myself into the process of making another batch, but soon realized that being arm-deep in cookie dough left my mind plenty of time to wander and worry. Utterly disgusted with myself, and feeling extremely dejected, I gave up on the cookies, put the dough in the refrigerator, and trudged back up to my room to think about what I should do. Then the perfect excuse hit me. Presents for Nicholas and Katie. I knew instinctively what Katie would love, and I dug through my perfumes, impatiently looking for a scent that I hadn't used before. I came to an older mix, and after a quick check on the description label, I unscrewed the lid and took a deep whiff. The scent, with hints of violet and honeysuckle, had been sitting for over a year and had aged very well. It was almost old-fashioned smelling, and I knew right away that it was the perfect one to give to her. Then I sat back and pondered what to do for Nicholas. I wasn't entirely sure that he would enjoy getting perfume as a Christmas gift. Plus, I didn't want him to get the wrong idea and think that I was giving him the hint that he needed a new scent. The smell of fresh cookies still lingered on the air, and it distracted me as I inhaled appreciatively. Inspiration hit again, and I headed back downstairs. Just as I knew that Katie would love the perfume, I knew that Nicholas would love some freshly baked cookies. Choosing from the selection of gingerbread, snickerdoodle, and Russian thumbprint cookies Mom and I had made earlier, I put them all into a brightly colored round tin. When it was stuffed full, I snapped the lid shut and added a bow. It was time to play Santa. I navigated the streets outside carefully, trying to avoid any patches of hidden ice. The snow was still falling, and the fine film stuck wetly to the ground. I slipped and slid every now and then, but I successfully managed not to drop my bag of loot along the way. It didn't take me long to get across town, and the Maxwell's house soon came into sight. I stepped cautiously up the narrow stairs and stomped my feet once I'd reached the landing. There had always been a slight gap in the sheer white curtains that covered the front window overlooking the porch, and I peeked through it as I set my bag down on a dry spot. Both of the Maxwells were sitting on a small couch, and they appeared to be in deep conversation. I watched as Mr. M gestured wildly with his hands while Mrs. M shook her head. When I peered closer, I could see that her eyes were red, and she had a bunched-up tissue in her hand. Obviously, this was not the best time to interrupt. Quietly, I dug into my present bag and withdrew their gift. Fluffing out the edges of the slightly crushed bow, I looked around for the safest spot to put it. The door frame caught my eye. It was large, deep, and dry. I wedged the present in so that it sat propped in an angle, and readjusted it once or twice before knocking softly at the door. Even if they didn't answer right away, I knew they would find it sooner or later. Picking up my bag and giving a final glance over my shoulder, I crept off the porch and headed toward the cemetery. On to my next destination. I pulled my coat tighter around me as I walked, feeling the sting of the biting snow. I didn't realize how much of a difference it had made standing under a covered porch for those couple of minutes. It was freezing out here. Instead of turning back, though, I trudged on, gripping my bag tightly. When I came to the large cemetery gates, I picked up my pace. I still had quite a walk in front of me, and the weather was getting worse. Taking the main path, I made my way past the Irving gravesite and went farther to the other side of the cemetery. The route was still fresh in my mind, and I followed the winding road, making several turns when I needed to. With the cold breath of winter in the air, the forest around me was grey and ominous. There weren't any birds out this time, and most of the plants had withered away. It all looked so barren and empty. It was a vast difference from the last time I'd been here. I turned my eyes ahead, continuing down the path in front of me. I couldn't afford to stop now. Stuck in a snowstorm was not somewhere I wanted to be. Spotting the large stone chimney, I ran the rest of the way and knocked loudly when I reached the front door. It swung open immediately, and Nicholas stood there looking concerned, with Katie by his side. Their eyes lit up when they saw it was me, and they tried to wave me in, but I put up a hand. "I can't stay long. I just wanted to wish you guys a Merry Christmas and give you these." I pulled their gifts from my bag and thrust them into their hands. A huge grin broke out on Nicholas' face as he passed the perfume back to Katie. She held the bottle up to the faint light behind her and examined it eagerly. "It's a perfume," I explained. "Remember I told you that I make perfume? The scent is for you, Katie. You just unscrew the top and hold your finger over it while tilting it upside down. That's how you get some out." She unscrewed the lid and did as I'd instructed, then held her fingers up to her nose to smell. "It's wonderful," she exclaimed, the look of pure delight on her face. "I smell honeysuckle vines and wild violets. Two of my favorite things. You have quite a talent, Abby. Thank you very much for my beautiful gift." I nodded, impressed with her ability to pick out the individual scents. Nicholas quickly turned the attention to his gift by loudly popping off the tin top. Katie and I laughed at the expression of glee on his face when he saw what was inside. "Cookies! Did you, by any chance, happen to make any of these, Abby?" I nodded again in response to his question. "Yeah, I helped make them." "They look delicious. Thank you, Abby. It means even more to me knowing that you have put your time and attention into them." I blushed, overcome by their words of praise. "It was nothing. Really, you've both been so nice to me that I just wanted to give you a small token of my thanks." "Why don't you come in and warm up for a while?" suggested Katie. "I'll make us some tea." I shook my head regretfully. "I'd love to, but I can't. I have one more stop to make, and then I have to get home for dinner. In fact, I'd better be on my way." Katie leaned forward to give me a quick hug. "All right, dear, but come see us again for a visit after Christmas, okay? We have much to talk about." Okay. Nicholas stepped forward to give me a side hug, and I got lost for a moment in a memory of my grandfather and his bear hugs. I squeezed Nicholas tight, wishing even as I let him go that he was my grandpa. That would be a nice Christmas gift. Katie disappeared for a minute and then returned. She had a small bundle in her hands. "I almost forgot. This is for you, dear. We weren't sure when we would see you again, so we've been holding on to it. Merry Christmas." I accepted the bundle she held out to me and tucked it safely into my bag. Thank you both, and Merry Christmas to you too. I'll definitely be back to see you after Christmas. Save some peppermint tea for me." They laughed and waved as I started down the path that led away from their house. I threw one last grin over my shoulder and called out, "Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night." But the wind tore my words away and scattered them to the trees around me. Looking up at the ever-darkening sky, I hunkered into my coat and set off to find my way back to the cemetery. I was almost out of time. When I finally made it back to the trail, I followed it until it brought me to a familiar tombstone, and I stopped short, struck again by the vivid reminder that my best friend was dead. I grabbed Kristen's perfume vial and then dropped my bag to the ground. Uncorking the vial, I held it carefully, trying not to spill any. Then I carried it over and knelt directly in front of the tombstone. I brushed away some snow caught in the etched lettering carved onto its surface before I spoke. "Hey, Chris, Merry Christmas Eve. I brought you a present. Dumping the perfume onto the frozen ground, I watched it slowly eat through a thin layer of snow and ice. The sweet scent of grapefruit, ginger, and vanilla rose up around me. I have to go now, I said, but I wanted to let you know that your mom and dad won't be alone on Christmas. They've agreed to come over for dinner. Oh, and I gave them their gift already. I had a star named for you. I tucked the now empty vial near some fake flowers at the foot of a tombstone, then stood up. Bye, Kristen. See you tomorrow. I won't forget our tradition. The wind roared again, and I turned away, stooping to pick up my bag as I went. The fastest way out of the cemetery was to pass the Irving family plot, so I chose that way, sneaking a quick peek as I walked by. I noticed immediately that the metal gate was open and wedged with a large rock to keep it in place. I climbed up the stairs, intrigued as to who would have left the gate that way. A quick scan of the enclosed area revealed that it hadn't been done by anyone intent on vandalizing the graves. Nothing was disturbed. Instead, it appeared to have been done for me. A long flat box was propped up next to Washington Irving's grave, and my name was boldly scrawled on it. Or rather, as I could tell when I got closer, my nickname was scrawled on it. A bittersweet pang struck my heart while I gazed around me. The package had definitely not been here when I'd passed earlier. It must have been dropped off while I was at the cottage. Apparently the giver had decided not to stick around though, because it was nowhere in sight. Scooping it up, I shook off some snow and held it reverently. The words "Do not open till Christmas" were written in big block letters under the name Astrid, with several stern exclamation points. I smiled and looked around me again before withdrawing Caspian's gifts from my bag. Unwinding the long black scarf from my neck, I used that as an extra layer of protections for Caspian's small pile. I had no idea how long it would be before he found them, but I hoped they wouldn't get too wet. Placing them in exactly the same spot as he'd placed mine, I kissed one fingertip and touched it to the pile. If I didn't get to see him at all for Christmas, then this would have to be my silent message to him. The cold snow started settling rapidly on my bare neck and quickly reminded me of where I was, so I tucked the gift from him into my bag and stepped away from the grave. "Merry Christmas, Caspian," I whispered to the wind. "I love you."